Hi, I'm Tony Kent, and this is episode 9 of Tony Kent Writes and Chats. It's the 10th of April, it is Good Friday, and this is take 2. And the reason this is take 2 is that take 1 was ruined by a 2-foot, 2-year-old interloper who decided to run from his nightly bath and streak across screen with his mother in fast and hot pursuit. Yes, my son Joseph decided to ruin take 1, and that's the reason his mum is now reading his nightly story rather than me, because I still need to do this. I'm afraid I have no idea how to edit any of these, so it's always in one take. Right, where were we? That's it, day 9, episode 9. Rest, it's Good Friday today. It's also the sunniest day of the year so far, just incredibly sunny for an Easter weekend, which has been a massive distraction, I have to admit. I looked out the window today while I was writing and I had that sort of very English reaction of, there's the sun, I need it to burn me please. And so went outside, played with Joseph with my shirt off. Turned out that, yep, I can still burn and become every bit as red as I could last year. I don't know why I think that might change year on year, but yeah, that's the way it goes. Apart from there seems to be more skin now, which I blame on the lockdown, but substantially more skin. We'll do something about that as well. But yes, some work was done whilst it was distracted work. And whilst I was doing this work, whilst I was writing and taking things forward, and we're almost at the point now where I'm about to drag in some of our major characters, our ongoing major characters, into the initial part of what they need to investigate. Whilst I was doing that today, I had to do some immediate research. And I thought, well, that would be an interesting thing, won't it, to talk about tonight. So, research. Everybody's different. Every writer researches in their own way. Everyone has their own technique. Some will just dive down into the rabbit hole and they will know everything about their subject before they write. That is not me. If I dive down into a rabbit hole, I am a natural know-it-all, and I would want to tell you everything I know, and you'd end up reading a thesis as opposed to a book. And as I've said many times, I want to write something entertaining. I want to put that movie in your mind, and that would not be helped if I was explaining the background to any given part of a scene or of a location. I'm the kind of writer that if I knew too much about Philadelphia's history, would give you chapter upon chapter upon chapter of Philadelphia's history. No use to anyone. So, what do I do in terms of research? Well, there are 2 different forms of research. There's a research you have to do when you are in the process of writing. And then, because of how I approach things, there's a research that I do also after the fact. And the first of those, the research in the process of writing, well, that's something you've got to do to make your chapters correct as you go, and your chapter won't work unless you know. So that's more things like direction and roads, and I'll check a map. So in my first chapter, I have 2 characters walking part of the quays of Key West, and I needed to know the actual geography, mainly because, as I said before, every time I've been in Key West, I've been slightly too worse for wear to be taking in the exact road names. So I had to go onto the map and remind myself. So that's the kind of thing that you would need to do. Or today, for example, I needed to know who would have jurisdiction over a particular crime that happens in a particular place. Yeah, would it be the state police? Would it be the local sheriff's office, etc., etc.? And I found that out today. And I found that out actually because I'm a member of several forums and groups on Facebook. Things like trauma fiction, where you go and find out how an injury would really be felt, or how a particular piece of violence would impact upon a particular part of the body. And there are lots of doctors on there who help with that. I mean, it's an incredible resource. And the thing I went to today is called Cops and Writers, and that's a very similar thing, but instead of doctors, it's cops, law enforcement agents from whatever departments. And so I asked my question today. It's all completely confidential. You ask your question and I was given an answer. 4 different Florida cops of all different agencies came back and gave me the answer. So I was able to continue and write the chapter correctly. So that's sort of the ongoing research. That's the research you have to do as you go. The big research is something a lot of people, as I said at the beginning, or the beginning of the research element of this, a lot of people do before they write. I am the opposite. My approach is that I think the world is logical. And I think that if it makes sense to me that something works a certain way, then it probably does. And also, as I said earlier, I am a complete know-it-all. And if it makes sense to me, but that isn't how it works, then in my mind it probably should, or it probably should be how it works, but that's another matter. The reality is, I'm generally pretty much in the right ballpark. I've been wrong a couple of times, and when I've been wrong, I've had to take those things out completely from a book and completely change things. But it's been very rare. Ordinarily, I will assume, sort of think, well, that must work that way because it's the only way it makes sense. I will write the book and finish the book with that as my assumption, and then I will go back and I will check out whether I was right. And in the majority of cases I have been, except obviously I lack detail. And it's then that I get the detail, and it's then that I get the small little quirks and the small little facts and figures that make this absolutely authentic. And that's important to me, because if I knew those facts and figures before, I'd find a way to shoehorn them in. Whereas once I've got the story written, the structure's there and it's all on the page, can't go shoehorning in the boring stuff. You just get it so it's correct. And that's important for me, and that's probably because of my own personality quirks, that I have to do it that way. Everybody is different. And I'll tell you a very quick story before we go, just to demonstrate what I've just said. In Killer Intent, there is reference to a particular military unit, of which Dempsey is a member, or was a member, and of which another character in Killer Intent was formerly a member. And this unit, I pretty much based it on the 00 section in the Bond films. But also, it made sense to me that it would exist. It's a unit within a unit, and it made sense to me it would exist. And when I finished Killer Intent, I gave it to an acquaintance of mine who is very well known in the Special Forces world, very, very well respected former member of the SAS, and he read it and said, "How did you know about such and such a thing?" And I said, what are you talking about? He said, let's call it the unit because it's easier. He said, well, the unit, why have you, who told you about that? I mean, it's supposed to be a secret. To which my response was, well, no one's told me about that until you just did. It just made sense to me that it would exist. And it turns out that the thing I described almost entirely, I got the numbers wrong, but apart from that, almost entirely existed. And that really is the basis of how I go about researching my books. I make assumptions based upon logic. If that logic is proved wrong in the editing process, well, then I'll make the changes. But I'm happy to say the world does seem to be pretty logical, because 90% of the time I don't need to make big changes. I just need to throw in a bit of detail to get the authenticity right. Okay, that is a little chat about research. It was interesting. Before I go, I'll say one more time again, please use the comments. If there's anything that interests you, anything you want to know, anything you want to talk about. You saw the other day we got an entire episode out of a question that was put onto one of the comment boards. Please add them, say them, ask them, and we'll see where it takes us. Okay? And we'll be back tomorrow. Thanks very much.